Audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. I am your host, Ms. Bazam. With me, my friend, Mr. Riaz Haq, and our own Mr. Sabahat Ashraf. Riaz, first of all, I would like your comments on Madam Kulsoom Nawaz's demise. How you see that?
I think it's a tragedy for the family, obviously. Not only for the ex-Prime Minister, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, but their children. It's a very sad, week for them and for the entire PMLN family. And in fact, I would say that all those who have stood up for democracy in Pakistan, because back in 1999, when Mr. Nawaz Sharif was in serious trouble, he was in jail. Some of his friends also went to jail with him. And then there were others who basically switched loyalties, left him by himself, joined the other parties. Begum Kulsoom Nawaz assumed the leadership of the party in a very difficult time. And she stood up for what she believed in. So I think she was a brave woman who deserves a lot of praise for her actions. And this is really a sad day for Pakistan.
Sabat, Begum Nawaz had these qualities which Riaz just mentioned, and besides that, there was one very senior media person was mentioning that President Musharraf was really scared with her, and nobody was expecting her, that she would come out right away. She stood up, she formed the ARD virtually, and then when her husband came back, she went back as a housemaker.
Right.
How you see that after, of course, if you want to do some condolences to the Sharif
first
family.
of all, we have to recognize that this is a human tragedy. And I know there's a lot of discussion about religion and this and that. I don't understand, frankly, how anyone can call themselves a Muslim or any person of faith or morality and make the kind of statements we are seeing on Facebook and other places, right? I just saw a rather senior member of our community here in Silicon Valley say something really, really uncharitable, discussing her death and say, basically talking about Nawaz Sharif and Maryam Nawaz, I would go die in Nadiyala. Not a shred, never mind sympathy, not a shred of humanity in that statement. That needs to be called out, right? Because if we're not going to call that out, then there is no use for us saying, talking about bigger issues like the Ahmadi issue or this or that. This is a human tragedy. This is the passing of a human being. And if you are going to call yourself a Muslim, the hadith is on the record about how the Prophet would respect even the funeral bier of a non-Muslim or someone who had hated him. Our history, our culture, our traditions are chock full of respect for humanity and for exactly this kind of situation, right? Having said that, as Riaz mentioned and you have mentioned, that Begum Nawaz was a human being and an intelligent human being. She was, for most of her life, she was a non-political spouse, which should also be respected, like, Mrs. Thatcher's husband or Michelle Obama. But, as you said, she was also not a dumb blonde. When she needed to step forward, she stepped forward. I believe she had an advanced education. And she came from a well-known family, as we say in Urdu, Game Pehlwan ki Nawaz.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is an important human
She had a master's from
from
Punjab University. And this is, we're talking about, you know, at a time when not very many women had advanced education. Yeah.
So she was a human being, and also particularly because she was a non-political spouse, seeing this kind of uncharitable thing really works me up. And you know, everything we're talking about. And of course, this is to be condoled to the Sharif family, to Pakistan, and for however little time she played a role in the politics of the nation, she was an important person. And as we keep talking about the evolution of democracy, of a new Pakistan being founded, a Naya Pakistan, we need much better conduct and humanity than we have seen this time.
But I would go to Riaz also on that for half a minute. But look at it, when she was alive, our anchor persons, politicians, they were all doubting their disease. Even there is a very interesting picture somebody posted today, that Begum Kulsoom Nawaz, and underneath it says that I am from the nation where to prove that I was sick, I had to die.
See, that again, that's another extreme, right? And when you get the kind of behavior I'm talking about, of course, people are going to react like that on the other side. And again, if we are going to try to evolve into a civilized democracy, then we need to get past these things and show some shred of humanity in that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the worst part of it was the statement by Etazaz Hassan, who I didn't expect to say things.
That's true.
Like, you know, this is all political, they're faking it for political advantage.
But she was ill, right?
While she was ill.
Right.
So I'm glad that finally, it's better late than never, that he did apologize.
Not only that, he asked Bilawal Bhutto to take him along to Mr. Sharif.
So I'm glad that he is recognizing the mistake he made and correcting that mistake now. It is better late than never.
Yes. And he said his apology was unconditional.
That's
very
true.
Important factor.
That's true.
People say, "Oh, I'm sorry, apology," but to make that kind of clear unconditional apology.
So let's go to the next topic. Riaz, now we are okay. Let's look at from the international policies, the foreign policies of the new government in Pakistan, and let's talk about what is happening these days. Now, Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, he visited Pakistan, and after that things started changing there. Do you think now that the government, just to have a support from United States when they will go for the IMF, now they start having these statements that they are pulling back, and one person saying we are reviewing, foreign office say we are not reviewing, then they are forming a committee, for what reason? Then Chinese ambassador goes to the general, and then general issues the statement. What's going on, Riaz?
Yeah, so I think there were obviously two visits. There was the visit by Pompeo, the United States Secretary of State, and we don't know the exact contents of what they discussed, but you know, there's been some coverage of it. And then it was immediately followed by a 3-day visit by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Now, Wall Street Journal has actually produced a video that basically says that both the United States and China are vying for influence in Pakistan. And the way Wall Street Journal explains it is that what the United States wants to happen is they want to make concessions to Pakistan, including supporting an IMF loan, but they want to put certain conditions on it. And the kind of conditions they're talking about have to do with CPEC, with Chinese loans. One of the things specifically it says is the United States feels that if Chinese investments in Pakistan succeed, if the China-Pakistan economic corridor is actually completed, it will result in a significant increase in Chinese influence, not only in Pakistan, but in the rest of the world. Because CPEC is considered a demonstration project. And if it succeeds, then the other countries will also go along with it, as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. So what they say is that China's BRI is essentially, if it's successful, China will become the greatest superpower on earth. They will supplant the United States not only in Pakistan, but in much of the rest of the world. And what they'd like to do is slow CPEC down as much as possible. The Chinese foreign minister, on the other hand, wants to push CPEC along. He basically asked for continuation of all of the projects. So I think Pakistan is caught between two great powers. And Pakistan has to be careful. You know, they obviously have the issue. They cannot displease the United States. At the same time, they want to maintain good, close ties with China. So they're in a jam. One of the things that I've heard they have done, this was reported today in by the South China Post, a newspaper. It says that they have agreed to open up the CPEC for other countries to invest in it. And they're hoping that that would satisfy the Americans and the West. And they would allay some of their fear that this is China's strategic play, which is essentially aimed at a geopolitical play, which is aimed at supplanting the United States.
Yeah, Sabat, I saw this article which Riaz just quoted. However, there are some other articles which in some ways kind of denying this thing that China has really agreed. Because see, they say that we are investing for the investment zones and now we will let other people come and start investing in that. That question is there always. Okay, second thing is we don't know that what would happen. Second thing is that why the Pakistan government has to say publicly these things. Why don't they sit down with, if I do understand that if they want to discuss some of the things or at least understand some of the things which Nawaz Sharif government was doing with China, why they came out and public everything, why they didn't sit with Chinese and then sit down and make these deals, and maybe then China would feel much better, you know.
I don't know about that. You know, a lot of these things, when you see these things in public, my take is always that some of it is actually part of the negotiation. By making it public, they are strengthening their own hand. If they had just sat down with China, they would still be in a weaker position because they have the smaller.
So you are saying they wanted to have US hear that? That is the thing? Most
probably. Because, you know, when I see a headline like the Wall Street Journal saying, oh, the US and China are vying for influence in Pakistan, I'm sitting there going, duh, that's been happening for 70 years, right? The point is, let's talk about the specifics in this case. And the US and Pakistan, throughout the Cold War and afterwards, had thrown its lot in with the West, economically and socially. But however, has always had a very good all-weather friendship, as they call it, with China. Now China is starting to throw its weight around the world. And it's going in. I have not seen, and here's the interesting thing. Have you seen any of these headlines or this much attention being paid actively by the US government or other people when China stepped into large parts of Africa and other places?
No, because Pakistan has a strategic partnership with them.
No, besides strategic partnership, Pakistan has a very strategic geopolitical position, which is now coming back into play. The problem was, after the end of the Cold War, Pakistan lost its geopolitical strategic position, and for about 10 years, I lived in Pakistan at that point, from 80 to 90 and a little beyond, Pakistan was completely left alone by the rest of the world, right? It became isolated, no one was dealing with them, it became kind of unimportant. There was a lot cogitating and evolving in that region, and today we are handling the consequences of that in the form of the Taliban and this and that. But now, again, because China is leveraging itself, Pakistan's geostrategic position is becoming relevant. And I actually think it's a good thing that you now have competing superpowers then that Pakistan, if it has good leadership, can play against each other for its own interest. Because if you're dealing with only one strong player, then you don't have as much of a negotiating or leveraging position. So now that the US has gotten involved, and it is this pressure that, as Yasa was saying in the article said, now China is having to throw things open, having to let other people in there. Because there has been a lot of serious concern within Pakistan as well, that we are selling out to the Chinese, right? There's been people that have been strong critics of CPEC. So this kind of thing, I actually see as a positive thing, as long as we can find it in ourselves as Pakistan and as Pakistanis to start, pushing our own interest and trying to see, hopefully with this new government, we can get a government, if not this government, then the next government, and we can start to stand up for ourselves and try to get a better deal from all of these. It shouldn't be an either or. It should be, hey, we are an important country, you have to deal with us. You have to make the best deal for us.
Yeah. So, Riaz, do you agree?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for Pakistan to negotiate the best possible deal with China. One of the things that I saw, it was, I think, last week, the Chinese ambassador to Pakistan wrote an op-ed in Global Times, which is supposedly a Chinese organ, state organ. It actually speaks for the Chinese government, English Delhi. And Global Times article, in the Global Times op-ed, there's two things he said that China wants to do. Now, they realize that Pakistan is having trouble with the debt and having trouble with the ability to repay the debt. Their exports are down. There's two things that he says China is ready to do. Number one, China is ready to invest in export-oriented industries in Pakistan, meaning in the kind of factories and in joint ventures with Pakistani partners, in joint ventures which will produce products that can be exported. And China, at the same time, is willing to open its markets to the Pakistani products, give Pakistani products greater access to Chinese market. Now, Chinese market is a huge market. Now, if you remember how the Asian tigers did so well, there's two things the West did, particularly the United States. Number one, American companies invested in export-oriented industries in these countries. I still remember I used to go to, places like Malaysia and Singapore and Korea. There were factories there. A lot of those factories were actually American factories producing products that were then exported to the United States. And then they gave them access to the American market, whatever they produce. So that allows them to earn enough foreign exchange that whatever debts they have, that they can repay those debts and build up significant reserves. So this is the kind of offer that I think the Chinese are making. That is what I see from that op-ed. I think that would be a great thing for Pakistan if the export-oriented industries grow up in Pakistan and they get access to a big market like China's market to export those products. And of course, they should look for other markets as well. So I think that is a good recipe for Pakistan's future success.
So you have to add something?
No, I think that captures it well.
Yeah, so I have only 1 minute. Did you read, by any chance, Get Fear?
No, I have been listening to his interviews, watching, his interviews, and they're very interesting. I mean, basically, he's confirming a lot of what we have been hearing from Michael Wolff before, and from Omarosa, and all the other leaks that come out, that there are serious problems within the administration. A lot of the White House staff is really angry and they're concerned and they're worried that this man, Donald Trump, is basically not able to, can't do his job. So that is the big concern that they have.
You want to add something?
Well, I guess this is what you'd call a teachable moment, right? So we're getting in real time. In history, we used to get these stories much later. There's stories about Pakistan's history that my father and his history professor friends used to tell us. There are stories like, for example, one lesser known anecdote is that our second Governor General, Ghulam Muhammad, basically had a stroke and he was barely functional in his last days. And it was, he was running the country through an interpreter and things like that. So there have been these moments before. In American history, there was, I think, Benjamin Harrison or someone, was very ill and his wife basically ran the country in the end. So these things have happened before. The difference in this case is we're finding out about it in real time. This is the age of the
No, the other difference, this is a superpower.
Yeah.
Well,
that is also...
It's a massive amount of power. It can do tremendous amount of damage.
Yeah, that's...
but in terms of what this does is, the timing is interesting. Midterms are coming up.
Yeah.
Let's see how this happens and what.
Yeah.
Who do you think it is that's doing this? People are pointing to Vice President.
And also Jeff Sessions. Also, some people think Jeff Sessions.
No, but Jeff Sessions is not that close. He's not in the White House.
Now you're switching from the book by Woodward to the op-ed.
He's talking about the New York Times and
which also came out at the same time.
It is very... So, ladies and gentlemen, this discussion will keep going on, and we would be talking more about it in coming days. I just bought the book and I did not read it. So thank you very much for watching our show. This is your host, Misbah Azam. This is Viewpoint from Overseas.